So the caption on this one is it possible to be a cool Christian? Swipe to see how I did it.
I think he meant to do cool Christian, but whatever.
Okay.
I sound like a hater already.
Swipe to see how I did it.
I am the worst. I am the worst.
I'm
so
excited
sorry.
to see how he did it. Streaming. We need to be in all the spaces of culture, shining a light to reach all demographics. I mean, that's what we're doing here, right? At Sola Media. Is this us?
That
don't look like us. I mean, maybe me.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I'm holding the camera. Going to technically started Christian nightclubs. This is a misunderstood topic in the body. Christian nightclubs have been a thing. Michael W. Smith started one in the 80s. LOL.
Yo,
do your homework on Rocket Town.
Can we fact check this, dude? Michael W. Smith started a Christian nightclub in the 80s? How have I never heard of this? That can't be true.
And that there can't be current ones because
I'm just not getting invited to these. I mean, it could be that we are so weird. Like,
right.
Maybe we're
not weird enough.
Hello, brothers and sisters, friends and family. I am here with, once again, our producer here at Core Christianity Sola Media, Aaron Simon, and we are having a conversation about making Christianity weird again. This is something Aaron and we were talking about the other day with some of the team, and I really think that we need to make Christianity weird again. What do you think, Aaron? What do we mean by that?
Yeah, I think we need to explain what you mean, because on the surface, it sounds terrible. It
People are like, awful. Man, it's already weird enough.
Yeah, it already sounds like, what do you mean? Like, as if it's not weird now.
Yeah.
This came out of reflecting on our last episode on the church being addicted to relevance. In that episode, we really only, we mainly spent our time talking about what's happening during a worship service. And we were critiquing things that we were seeing from pastors. We didn't talk a ton about how this plays out for the layperson in their kind of day-to-day life. I think that's kind of what sparked this. And the Bible seems clear that the Christian life is one that is counter to the world in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. And there are some parts of being a Christian that are going to be jarring to the world and will look weird. Part of this relevance thing just got us to, well, if we don't look weird at all, if we seem to just kind of fit in all ways, like maybe we're doing something wrong.
Yeah. I think that's it right there. So a couple of things that got me thinking about this is I'm currently preaching through the Gospel of John. And on a couple of occasions, Jesus talks about being not of this world. So throughout the Gospel, at the very beginning of the Gospel, he talks about how he's not from this world, right? He came down from heaven. But then he makes it clear that just as he is not of this world, so too his followers, his disciples, are also not of this world. They're born from above. He makes this clear in places like John 3, but also in John 17 in his high priestly prayer, where he says that they also are not of this world. Yeah. And so there's something about our identity as Christians that makes us foreigners to the world. And in my mind, as I was thinking about this, I was sort of reflecting on a trip that my family and I went on back in 2023. We were in France for a little bit, and I was very much a foreigner there, right? And it was obvious that I was a foreigner there. I didn't speak the language. I didn't have the customs. So too, there should be a part of our identity as Christians that, people see us and they think, okay, there's something foreign about that person. Yeah. And yet I feel like in our day-to-day living, it's really easy to fall into the temptation as a follower of Jesus to like, I just want to fit in. I want to be like everybody else. And I think actually that's a strategy that sometimes people will have for cultural engagement is how can we look as much as we can like the world or fit in, or make them feel like, there's nothing weird about those Christians. They're they're kind of like they're cool, but they're more spiritual or whatever. When in reality, I wonder if we're fighting against something that we really shouldn't be fighting against. We should actually just embrace this weirdness, this biblical weirdness that ought to characterize us of, we actually aren't of this world. There's something different about us. And so naturally, people are going to treat us as foreigners in some respects. And some people are going to be attracted to that. Some people are going to be put off by that. And that's okay. And I wonder if we need to accept that as followers of Jesus and lean into that instead of trying to pretend like we're not that.
Yeah. And one thing that's difficult about this conversation is we have to clarify what we mean and don't mean by weird, by cool, by acceptance, all these things, because as we said in the beginning, there are some people that would look at us as weird already, and they would be referencing things that even you and I would say, like, this isn't okay.
Yeah. Or we would, maybe it's not that it's like morally bad, but it's just like socially awkward.
But it is just weird.
It is weird. Yeah. Yeah.
And so we're not trying to say we need more of that. We're kind of redefining biblical weirdness.
Yeah.
I guess I don't really know a better way to say it.
No, that's a great way of putting it. It might be helpful to think through, like, what are some of those ways that, you know, maybe Christians can be weird culturally or socially. And we're saying, well, that's not what we're not talking about being socially awkward. We're talking about being distinct from the world in our customs, in how we think, in our passions, the things that we devote ourselves to, in our affections, the things that we love. So it's like those things look different for the believer than for the person who is not in Christ. Some of the people watching this or listening to this might know that there's this really ancient Christian writing. It's called the Epistle of Diognetus, and it's one of the earliest sort of extra-biblical writings that we have out there. And at one point, it describes the way in which Christians lived and what characterized them. And one of the things that's highlighted there is that the early followers of Jesus were very much like other people in terms of how they dressed, in terms of, you know, the fact that they were following the laws of the land, but even more faithfully than most people.
Yeah.
Where they were distinct is in the fact that they were not promiscuous like everybody else. They were not exposing their children. That was sort of like an ancient early form of abortion. So it's like, we don't follow the morals of this world and the passions of this world, but we speak the same language.
Yeah, I think when I think of like a good example of biblical weirdness, I think of Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, loving your enemies and praying for those who persecute you. That is a very weird concept culturally. Turn the other cheek, same kind of thing. When you think of somebody like Dr. King, who is advocating for nonviolence and using passages like that as backing for the why, that was very countercultural.
Yeah, those are good examples. You know, a lot of people don't realize that early on, Christians were seen as very weird because of how they worshiped. They were referred to as atheists because they didn't have all of the iconography and imagery that the pagan religions had. So you didn't have these physical idols that were a part of your worship. You know, it's like, where's your God? We can't see your God. But then also, you know, they talked about doing things like eating the body and blood of Jesus Christ. And so it's sort of funny, but early on, there were a couple accusations that were made against the Christians. One was that they were cannibalists because, you know, people heard them talking in this way. You know, they get together in their secret ceremonies that they do, and they're eating somebody's body and blood. Yeah. So it wasn't just that, but, you know, they're cannibals, they're atheists, and they hate humanity. They're haters of humanity. That was another thing that oftentimes people said. But there were all these accusations that were made, and in part it was because there was something so distinct about these early followers of Jesus and how they worshiped God. Now, you know, the way in which they were maligned by the world, sort of like, you know, what Jesus says, you know, let your good work shine before men so that when they say things about you, you know, they really don't have a leg to stand on. Mm-hmm. And I think that was really the case for these early followers of Christ, is people were saying all sorts of things about them, but the reality is these Christians were leading in charity, in loving their enemies, and that was what had such a profound effect on the Roman world, on the Roman Empire. Is like, these Christians are faithfully bearing their crosses and following Jesus and serving their neighbors. There's a sociologist named Rodney Stark who, you know, he wrote a book some years ago called The Rise of Christianity, and he talked about the spread of Christianity early on, and he talked about how, you know, in the Roman Empire there were these plagues that hit the Roman Empire that were really devastating, and the people who really stepped up during those times were the Christians who were nursing their sick neighbors back to health, oftentimes contracting these diseases and dying, but the result was many people were converted because some of them were nursed back to health and were like, man, I want to be a Christian because of the fact that my life has been saved. But others were just seeing this charity in action, and that had a powerful evangelistic impact on the world. So it's that kind of weirdness, I think, that countercultural weirdness, whether it's love for our enemies or moral purity. especially in our day today. Like that's weird to people, and that's an area I think where we will continue to be maligned as a church today. I was forgetting one of the other accusations that these early pagans made against the Christians, but one of them was essentially that they practice incest. Because they talked about brotherly love and all this stuff. Yeah, I mean, but that was like one of the common accusations. And so Christians were viewed as very weird, and yet they sort of embraced that and embraced the call of Jesus to be faithful to his word, obedient to his law, to love their neighbors, and to be unspotted from the world. And yeah, people thought they were weird, but it was powerful. It wasn't like they were just trying to replicate what the pagans were doing to impact them. It was, no, we're going to be faithful to God, and that bore fruit.
The early church looking different from the rest of the pagan world by their emphasis on the body and valuing the body versus the pagan world saying that the body is the worst part of us and it's all about the soul.
Mm-hmm. Hey, you know what? I mean, we could get into some deep stuff there, but I think that's a great point, because you think of like in our culture today, how the sort of physical life of the body is treated as, no, that's not really who I am. It's the psychological man. It's my inner person. That's what determines my identity. So that even if I'm in, if I feel like I don't identify with my body, like that really doesn't matter, because that's not the real me. I'm curious, Aaron, like the work you've done in various churches, and you've I mean, I don't want to out you right now, but you got like a background in music. And,
Sure.
And I think you've probably seen, even in that world, with Christians, right? I think there's a temptation for us, again, to not want to be weird, to not want to be different or seen as different. And so, do you feel like you've seen this temptation play out seriously, especially in that arena?
Yeah, I think a lot of people would agree with what the tension we're feeling of, like, we don't want to like be weird for actual like weirdo reasons. Christianity in specific cultural spaces has a reputation of just being like a corny version of a less than or a corny version of whatever that cultural thing is.
Yeah.
And so you're right. I have seen in my experience a lot of people who they are genuine conversion, genuine Christians, but they posture and even create music seeming, in my opinion, to clearly be still trying to hold on to the cool points they had before they were believers. And so let's say before you were a Christian, you were in them streets and you used to move weight, you used to be sexually promiscuous, you robbed a bunch of people, all these things, right? All these things that will give you some type of what they call street cred, right? I hate the phrase, but you get what I'm saying. There are people who become a Christian and they don't associate with the corny parts of Christianity either, but they have had this genuine conversion, but they have spent a lifetime building up this other reputation that they still value. Because there is, and in their defense, there is something valid about like your name being, people putting respect on your name.
And they're still trying to kind of hold on to that, you're saying?
I think that's the problem. It's like you want to have a good reputation, right? You want people to speak well of you when you're not in the room, but trying to maintain this street cred that you earned over the years now in Christendom, like doesn't add up. It doesn't match. It doesn't make sense. Such and such secular rapper writes a song about all these things that he does. I'm sexually promiscuous. I steal all the things, or I shoot all the people, or whatever it is, right? I sell all the drugs.
Like song titles to me.
Right? I sell all the drugs. Great song title. And then
I sell all the drugs.
I sell all the drugs. It's a great
Track
song title. Then Christian rapper who used to live that life writes the song talking about all the things that he used to do, right? And then at the end of it, you say like, but I've been forgiven for it, and I've had I'm a new person, right? But like, 95% of that song is the same record.
You know who that reminds. And I don't want to put them on blast, but back when I used to be,
I know exactly what you're
I'm thinking
say.
Of the Gospel Gangsters. Have you?
Of course, I know Gospel Gangsters.
Yeah.
They're legends.
Because I remember, so they were like early on, sort of Christian hip hop.
Rest in peace, Mr. Solo, man. They're
Okay,
legends.
I've not kept up with them, but I remember when I first, I liked them because they had kind of the West Coast hip hop vibe. but they also very much were like, if you listen to their music, it was kind of like, yeah, they're still in that world. It's like.
So I will say, I don't consider them a good example of this because I think the gospel gangsters were very, very forward in terms of like, they were always pushing Christ all the time.
Got you.
So they were definitely still in that world, for sure. And they definitely had that reputation, that rep, and they kept it. But their lyrics were always very Christ in the forefront.
Yeah.
I'm talking about a lot of artists now. They spend most of it talking about their old life. And then at the end they say, but I'm forgiven and I don't do that anymore.
But they kind of are still glorifying the old life a little bit, you're saying.
They're being sneaky. Well, I don't think they're glorifying the old life. I think what they're doing is they're doing it to hold on to their street cred. They're telling their current followers and any new people, like, I have respect in the streets for these reasons. What you don't hear is, I used to sexually assault women, but I no longer do that.
Yeah.
I used to struggle with homosexuality, but I no longer do that. You see what I'm saying? So like what happens is the only old sins they're open about are the ones that are currently socially acceptable in culture.
Yeah.
Nobody is writing songs about the sins that are still taboo to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Only the ones that the world glorifies.
Now, we've gotten into this kind of niche world of how this happens in kind of like the hip hop music world. But the reality is, this is something I think that all of us as followers of Jesus can struggle with, which is the temptation to dabble with worldliness, to fit in. And so, it's not just something that with the music industry. I think this is something for like all the people in our church. It's something for us.
Yeah.
Because we want to be accepted by the people around us. We want to be seen as, we want that, we call it street cred. We want people to respect us. And there are things about following Jesus and being faithful to him that other people might look at and just say like, oh, I don't like that. I don't like you. I don't like the way you think about that thing. And so if we're clinging to that credibility in their eyes, we're going to be tempted to compromise. And one thing I would just want to say is, especially for younger Christians who are beginning to feel that conviction, the veil has been removed and they no longer want to live in that space. But I was talking to somebody about this the other day, who, probably, has come to faith in the last couple of years, and their life has just totally changed. And they were kind of hanging out in a space that they used to hang out around, but now was totally different for them. And they felt that kind of conviction, almost like, you see through these new spiritual eyes, and you can see now like, man, all of these things that I used to enjoy and have fun doing, now I really feel like almost a spiritual oppression when I'm around these things. And I think they were struggling with like, is there something weird about me? And I kind of want to just be like, yes, but it's good. That's a good, like, actually embrace that and don't let anybody tell you that there's something wrong with you. Actually, that's what we need more of, I think, is that zeal for being faithful to the Lord and being willing to say like, you know what, that's not me anymore. Yeah. And one passage I just wanted to bring up real quick, and it was a passage that came to my mind as I was talking to this friend. It's 1 Peter chapter 4, and he says in verse 3, "For the time already past is sufficient for you to have carried out the desire of the Gentiles, having pursued a course of sensuality, lusts, drunkenness, carousing, drinking parties, and abominable idolatries. In all this they are surprised," they being the people around you, right? Like the world. They are surprised that you do not run with them into the same excess of dissipation, and they malign you. They will give an account to him who is ready to judge the living and the dead. He's saying, look, you guys used to do all these things, and now you don't. And people around you, they think you're weird. They're surprised that you don't pursue that same, flood of debauchery or dissipation or whatever. And they malign you because of it. And I don't know if you experienced this. I remember when I first came to Christ, and there was a lot of things that sort of shifted in my life. My old friends sort of teasing me and joking, maligning me. And you can feel very much like, I don't fit in anymore. But that's the point. That's okay. That's a good thing. And I think that's what Peter's getting at here. And man, I my sense is that if we as Christians, if we as the church could just embrace that and lean into that biblical weirdness of saying, no, it's good that we're different. We want to be distinct. We don't want to be like the world, not in its sin, and we want to excel the world in charity, in love. I think that makes us so much more effective evangelistically, and I think it's also the vision that's set forth for us in Scripture. But it's one which I wonder if we really are as excited to embrace.
Yeah, and I want to say too, like when you come to faith, I don't think what I'm not saying is that you just abandon whatever culture you came out of or came from. There's just going to be things that you just no longer partake in. Yeah. So I feel actually super fortunate I've had a lot of examples of being the only Christian in secular spaces and just friend groups or even just like broader cultural things that I'm a part of, and being very transparent about who I was and what I believed, and that wasn't a problem for them. I think maybe the fact that I was authentic about it was something they at least respected. So yeah, I don't think you need to jettison whether you're part of the like punk rock scene or I don't know, chess club, whatever the thing is that you're into. Like you don't need to just like abandon it. It doesn't mean that there isn't a space for you to partake in these things as a Christian.
That's a good point.
Yeah, but it's just like naturally any culture that is built from the world and not from the body is going to have certain aspects of it that no longer will work with your conscience. And so you got to figure out how to, or not even just how to, if you can still participate with and not sin. Mm-hmm. And I think for some people they can, and for those that can't, then maybe you do jettison that.
I mean, honestly, sometimes when you make those kinds of shifts in your life, it can be convicting for the people around you too. Because sometimes I think there are people who are like, they can be attracted to it and drawn to it and be like, man, I want that as well. Or they can be threatened by it. And so it's interesting how that can have a serious impact on your relationships. And it may not be that you're trying to push people away, but they can be, like Paul says, for some people we're the aroma of life, for some people the aroma of death. Like some people are going to be repelled by your relationship with Jesus and the fact that the Spirit of God lives in you and that you have these new spiritual taste buds and senses. Like that's going to be hard for some people. And
also when you're doing that, even if you don't see any type of immediate rejection or acceptance, just your presence and consistency, like the Lord is using that. So it's like a lot of the work isn't very visible and isn't very obvious. It's just like time and seeds and seeds and seeds just being sown year after year after year.
I mean, God help us to be faithful in that, right? Like to embrace the weirdness of what it means to, and we're using that word weird, but really what we're just saying is we're not of this world.
Yeah. So, normally when we do these, I have a video or something that I'll show you and have you watch and respond to.
Can't wait. Yeah.
So I don't use TikTok, but Arianna, who works on our production team, is very active in it. And so I'm going to have, you can come on.
And by the way, Aaron and I have been using words like cook and Arianna taught us these words. She's helping us connect.
I'm helping you to be one with this generation. Is that what you're saying?
Never mind. Yeah, actually, my kids have been. It's funny. My kids have been dropping these ones. So, yeah, I think I'm cooked right now. Actually, so
we'll see.
Yes. So, Adriel, I have some photos and videos to show you. All so, right. I think what would be helpful is if you could, and you and Aaron are going to share the iPad. So, for our audio listeners, these first few are photos. So, for the photos, if you could read out the captions for our audio listeners, that would be helpful. And then the videos will play after, and then you guys can talk about them.
Okay. So the caption on this one is it possible to be a cool Christian? Swipe to see how I did it.
I think he meant to do cool Christian, but whatever.
Okay.
I sound like a hater already.
Swipe to see how I did it.
I am the worst.
I'm so excited to see how he did it. Streaming. We need to be in all the spaces of culture, shining a light to reach all demographics. I mean, that's what we're doing here, right? At Sola Media. Is this us?
That
don't look like us. I mean, maybe me.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I'm holding the camera. Going to technically started Christian nightclubs. This is a misunderstood topic in the body. Christian nightclubs have been a thing. Michael W. Smith started one in the 80s. LOL.
Yo,
Do your homework on Rocket Town.
can we fact check this, dude? Michael W. Smith started a Christian nightclub in the 80s? How have I never heard of this? That can't be true.
And that there can't be current ones because
I'm just not
Never
getting
heard of
invited
it.
to these.
Yeah,
I mean,
true.
it could be that
Maybe
we are
that's what it
so
is.
weird. Like
Right.
maybe
we're not weird enough.
We're not weird. Is that what it is?
or we are just weird.
There is no way Michael W. Smith started one of these. He doesn't even make club music.
All right, hold on. Going thrifting for vintage Jesus tees. Now, I would rock one of those, maybe to the gym or something like that.
I've unashamedly rocked plenty of Jesus tees because I worked at Family Christian Bookstore.
Oh, that's where
So
they had.
I was using my employee discount.
I feel like Family Christian Bookstores where they had like you would get it was a Jesus. It would be like the head of an eagle with a cross in the background and an American flag waving and like.
Now, see, for me, I mean, I wasn't wearing these, but like my association with these tees is the popular brand name that the word is changed to be something Christian. Like it was like the Reese's logo, and it said Jesus instead. That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's what I think bro's thrifting for.
Yeah.
That's what I think he's thrifting for.
Aura farming in museums.
So I'm
You're gonna have to explain that one to me.
I will help you with this one, Adriel. So aura farming is basically going into an experience that is quote unquote cool so that other people can see you doing it. So if you were to walk into a library with like your glasses on and a book and you're like, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to read this really big book so that other people can see what I'm doing and think I'm cool. So he's walking into a museum being like, oh, this is beautiful art. This is what God's created these artists. So he's doing it so other people will notice.
It's like if you walk into a Starbucks with Tolstoy's War and Peace, just casually reading it, you're like putting on a show.
So look, if I go to a museum, I've done this before. I don't know if this is a confession. I go to a museum. I go to the art museum in San Diego. I take a picture of the art and I post it.
Are you in the picture?
Usually not.
That's okay.
Okay, but if I'm in the picture, I'm aura farming.
It's the selfie one?
Well, a selfie is kind of just like, aw. If you're posted up like that, in your photo?
I'm for sure
you're cooked.
This is funny because this guy right here, you can't even see the art. You can't even see his face. You're just looking at his back.
But that's the point.
At least he's being honest.
Aura farming in museums. Plus, I love art, he says. The first thing God tells us about himself is he's a creative as well. I believe all believers should create something. It doesn't have to be art. Can I honestly ask a question there too? And I'm not trying to be a hater right now, but I feel like that word, like, or that's like, I'm a creative. That's is that pretty new? I feel like I started hearing that in like
what?
2017.
I don't think it's a new phrase. It may be more common in the last 5 years.
Since more people have coined themselves as content creators, that term then turns into I'm a creative because I'm creating content.
Nice.
So yes, I think more people are coining themselves as creatives.
All right. Well, this is cool, and I've learned a couple of. You're continuing to teach us, Arianna. I really appreciate this.
The cool Christians think we got to insert ourselves into the world and be a part of that. But God said that the church is the buttress and the pillar of truth. At some point, you got to put your foot down and say that's sin and call it out.
If I was Christian, I wouldn't be cool with being uncool. Maybe you Christians just need to up your game a little bit. Like learn how to kickflip. That's pretty radical. Here's one that's pretty cool. Don't embed your religious views into the laws of a society that is not homogeneously Christian. There's a lot of other things that make Christians uncool, but baby steps. Why not start with a kickflip?
I threw a funeral-themed party for my 2-year abstinence anniversary, so spend the day with me preparing for a funeral to my flesh. 2 years of abstaining is crazy. Like that, this day and age is a crazy feat. If you are on an abstinence journey, I just want to take a moment to encourage you that it does not matter what you did yesterday, what you did today, what you're going to do tomorrow. Just give yourself grace and remember that it's a journey. And as long as you continue to put God first, you really can't go wrong.
So there's a lot to unpack here.
There's a lot there.
Yeah. Well, I had two thoughts. I could never kickflip. I was like the worst skater of all my friends.
That's a sad story.
I know. I could do a pop shove it in the grass.
I don't even know what that is.
Without wheels.
Yeah,
But just
no,
the-
I have to be in the grass, man, because I was always afraid I was going to slip and fall. So,
See, she's teaching us aura farm.
I know.
We're teaching her
You're
skateboard
teaching-
tricks.
Skateboard
and
trick.
then also that last one.
For the record, I definitely could kickflip, and I think I can still do it now.
Yeah,
It's been a while, but I
man.
think I can still do it.
You need to be more weird for Jesus. That's too worldly. If you can
That's
land a
too worldly.
kickflip,
If you
that's
could still
worldly.
land a kickflip in this-
you're in the flesh. Do you think that girl was trying to be cool, or is that just like the kind of stuff that people do in broader evangelical circles? Like, I'm going to have a. It did remind me of what Paul says, where he talks about mortifying the deeds of the body, like putting to death. And so maybe there's a case to be made for a funeral for your flesh. I don't know, but
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just, okay, so here's some context about that young woman. So she is currently formulating her Christian life. And I think what's important, like you said, we don't want to bag on any of these people, right? She's doing something by putting her sin experience out into the world, bringing on judgment on herself, just trying to share her experience with others. So we don't want to bag on her. But she was in college and she was partying a lot, but she grew up Christian. So she's practicing all these things that she's trying to combat, but she was making her money as an influencer. So she's trying to keep working, but also grow in her faith and fit in with what the world is telling her she should do, but also fight it. She had a video where she was showing off her Churchella outfit. And so I think that specifically was more of an example of how we can fall into the opposite of uncool Christianity, which is cool Christianity, right?
There is kind of something analogous to that, to this idea of the funeral for your flesh I don't want to get too theological, but baptism, according to Paul in Romans chapter 6, that's precisely what it is. Like in baptism, I'm buried with Jesus and called to walk in newness of life. So it's sort of funny. I wonder if sometimes, and again, I feel like I'm, here I am like trying to overly get theological about this. But,
good.
I think the reality is there is what she's doing is built off of some actual biblical principles, but she's being super extra.
Yeah,
Right,
and
right.
this
So
is,
there's
this
a
is why
tension that
we
we're all
need
feeling.
to dig back into the scripture and the sacraments, and because we actually get that, we get the substance of those things in God's word and in the history of the Christian church. Arianna, because we have the privilege of having you with us right now, I'm curious of as Aaron and I have been talking about the, weird Christianity, or however you want to, just interested in your perspective. Obviously it's going to be, you got a different upbringing than Aaron and I, but do you feel like this is a real temptation for people, maybe even for younger people as well today?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. What's so fun about this is that often the other part of our team is on the sidelines and we're listening to you guys and we're forming our own thoughts and be like, yes, that's totally what I think too. And so the whole time when you guys were talking, I was thinking of stories in my head of how I would apply what you're saying. And I think what I would say for me is I did grow up as a Christian. I professed my faith when I was 4 years old in the Caterpillars class with Mr. AJ at my church.
Nice. Shout out to Mr. AJ.
Shout out to
Shout
Mr.
out Mr.
AJ. He still remembers me by name, and he's one of my favorite people. So I grew up going to a public school as well. And so I think kids are experiencing being uncool Christians in different ways as generations go on, based on what kind of church they grew up going to, whether they go to a public school, a private school, or a Christian school, a Catholic school. It's all going to look different. But for me, I grew up with kind of being a proud, uncool Christian. I was telling Aaron this yesterday, that I would proudly put Jesus freak stickers on my binders and proudly carry it around in public school, hoping people would ask me. There were times too, I was in marching band, and honestly, just being surrounded by a lot of secular kids, people can tell when you're different. And I proudly will say that there were kids that I knew I was different. And whether that was because I had a Jesus Freak sticker on my binder, I don't know. I hope that it's beyond that.
Is it because of the Jesus Freak sticker, or is it because you're in band?
Well, I hope it was because of my behavior, right? And I think something you were saying too is that there will be times when you become friends with people, they find out you're different, you're a Christian, and they won't want to hang out with you anymore. Or they'll start saying, oh, Arianna goes to church, so she probably doesn't do that or believe in that. And I felt that more than feeling I was embarrassed, I was more just proud of the fact that I'm showing that I'm different. And we talked about
so you embraced it. You were ahead of the game.
She had the Jesus Freak sticker. She was all in.
I like to say
you
that
had
I
the
did.
Not of This World sticker too, I bet. The NOTW.
This is something we talked about too. So Aaron, why don't you talk about Not of This World?
Well, based off of what we said yesterday, she was very into that. I thought the Not of This World thing was super cornball, like from jump. I hated it. I did.
I thought they were Jehovah's Witnesses at first, bro.
I think there was a rumor that they're...
Because I
they
couldn't
would
really
stand
tell.
at the front of the store and they would ask if they could pray for you. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but they would stand at the front of the store and they would go up and ask people if they could pray for you. That was the thing.
Maybe,
I remember that,
I just remember I got one pair of jeans as a Christmas gift once, and I was mad because I really liked the jeans, but they had the logo on the pocket, and I was like, yo, I can't wear this, man. And this isn't trying to be cool. This is like, I just think this is corny. Like, to me, I thought their whole, like, marketing and branding was trying to be cool.
Yeah.
I thought they were a microcosm of everything we're talking about. Now, respect to the people who, like, found identity and their faith being public through this way. Like, I don't want to knock that, but just for me personally, like,
it kind of felt like it was a little posturing, trying to be
not
not of this world, but we also are trying to look at the style we got, kind of a thing.
Yeah, but it was I wasn't a fan. I'll just say that.
Well, I thought of a verse that kind of has to do with Not of This World, and you guys were talking earlier about how our passions need to show up in the way that we are expressing our faith, but I also think it has to do with our patterns as well. So it's something that we're doing every day, even in the privacy of our own home as well. And so Romans 12:2 says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will."
Amen.
That might have been their tagline verse. I'm not sure. But that is just something I was thinking about, is how can we not only show what our passions are, whether they're, especially if they're weird, but also our patterns too. Because I think our uncool Christian behaviors can quickly become cool when we're only doing it to put on a show for others. It is truly uncool when we're doing it for ourselves and God's glory only, and not necessarily for others' view, right? Because again, that, not to use aura farming again, but that is kind of what it is, right? If it's for a show, then you're not doing it for the right reasons.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's what gets super messy about, like, going back to Homegrown, the video, is if you have I gotta stop using air quotes, if you feel like you have some sort of a career being an influencer, and then you have some big life-changing thing like coming to faith, you're immediately going to try to figure out how you can fit that into your job, right? And so you kind of have to package things a certain way to try to create content, and it can get gross pretty quick, you know?
I know this is a conversation we have internally together at Solo Media, and I'm with you, Aaron, as our producer, and is just not wanting to do that, not wanting to be that, and trying to fight against that. Arianna, what a great passage to bring in, Romans 12:2, because it just sort of sums up, I think, everything that we've been talking about. We're in this world, but we don't want to be conformed to the patterns of this world. And how can we recover that we're distinct from the world, but not in a pretentious way too? I was thinking when I became a Christian, I was in high school when I started going to church, and I started carrying my Bible to school. I had a big New King James Bible. It was like a Seventh-day Adventist study Bible. I don't know where I got this Bible. It was just the Bible that was at my house. So I had this big Seventh-day Adventist study Bible, and I would walk around. It was like my junior year of high school. And I definitely stood out, but I think there was a part of me that was also kind of like, I'm not cool, but I'm also better than you in some way. Like there was that kind of pride, I think, that I had.
I think that's what you were getting at a little bit too. Yeah.
Now it sounds like you were doing better than I was with that. But like I wrestled with that, and I think that's another danger is this, like, so as we enter into that, it's not to lift our nose up to other people or to look down on them. Really, it's ultimately about being faithful to the Lord, loving Him, and seeking to love our neighbors as best we can. And part of that, I think, is being distinct, is being different. And so...
Yeah, I actually have a question for you, because you were talking about some warnings to people, and Aaron and I were discussing this yesterday, and it was kind of brought up in the first video too. I want to go back and touch on that. They were discussing how our faith is a pillar, but there's a point where we can condemn other non-believers and believers for sins that they're committing. And so we were talking about, my example was when I went to Cal State San Marcos for college, there's a free speech area on campus. And so sometimes there would be protesters, I don't know if you call them protesters, but people with picket signs that would call out women for wearing what they thought was inappropriate outfits and saying basically, you're going to hell. And so Aaron and I were kind of talking about, is it right for Christians who think they're being quote unquote uncool by staying firm on what they believe the gospel says and calling out other people, because that is something that the Bible calls us to do. But what does it look like? Are we supposed to call out non-believers? Are we only supposed to call out believers? Is that uncool or cool to do? What would you say to those people?
Well, the way you posed the question initially made me think of Paul's words in 1 Corinthians 5, where he talks about judging our brothers and sisters within the church. This is in the context of church discipline. And then he says, for what have we to do with judging outsiders? Mm-hmm. And his point there is that, look, God is going to judge those outside of the church. But I don't think what he's getting at there is that we don't make judgments, or that we don't say, hey, this action that's happening by these people outside of the church is wrong or sinful or condemned by God or by God's word. I think it's just, we have a tendency as Christians to always want to point the finger outside. And sometimes we can have a difficult time identifying sort of the sins that we struggle with within our own context, within our own body. Something that really concerns me as a pastor is I feel like, okay, I need to preach to and against the sins of my people first and foremost. That doesn't mean that we don't address other sins outside in society, especially as they come up in Scripture. But you don't want to create like a rally of believers who are looking at the world in frustration as like, you guys are so terrible, we got it right. Yeah. And we're blind to our own sins, but we are pointing the finger of condemnation to everybody else. Mm-hmm. And so I think that there is a proper balance. And I think that first and foremost, we need to humbly look within our own hearts and look within the church and say, okay, Lord, where do we need to repent, and where can we continue to grow? And I think as we do that, you think of Jesus's words related to taking the speck out of your brother's eye, but first removing the log from your own eye. And so I think as we do that, as we're focused there, and as we're praying humbly, Lord, give us eyes to see and help us to press into this faithfulness to you, this obedience to you that might be viewed as weird by the world, so that we can actually serve the world better and speak the truth to the world. I think at some point we have to ask the question, am I just trying to point out a problem or heap condemnation onto people, or am I really seeking to pursue someone with the grace of Christ and to share Christ, share the gospel with them? So yeah, I think the church has to do both, but I think our tendency, and why you have those statements like Paul in 1 Corinthians 5, is because our tendency is to not want to look inside and to always want to point the finger outside.